Are you tired of your Wasp Launcher looking like this? Does your leaf blower constantly turn you into a shelf? Well, don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, because today we're going to make sure that this always gets the most value. Honestly, I think this is an insanely fun weapon to use, but it does have its hangups like everything, so we just put it through a bunch of stress tests to try and get around them. I ended up doing all this on stream, but it took a little bit to get this together because Christmas has been crazy, and I'm excited to bring in the new year with y'all. But in the process of finding this thing's secret technology, I had a ridiculous amount of fun, probably only matched by the Spear main expansion.
3, 2, 1, fire! All right, we got him.
Reloading.
So lighting this off, we'll start with the most important thing you need to do with the Wasp, and that's turn off half the gun. The normal fire mode lets you shoot 7 times and has a decent enough sized AoE to wipe out most patrols, but the artillery fire mode had the pre-nerf special. It eats all 7 of those shots for one big one, well-ish one. The AoE is too small to be useful, and the damage just isn't there either. You can shoot 6 of the normal rockets into a 7th artillery one, but it makes it smaller. Kind of pointless. You would also think that the horde clearing would be spectacular, but you can't even lock onto the targets that the artillery mode would usually shoot at. And the things you can shoot it at burn the entire cartridge to deal about the same damage that 3 normal shots would do. And after I shot this thing at everything, and I mean everything, you won't want to shoot it at anything except like a random bot turret. So to try and talk about this mode is kind of a waste of time until they buff it, but don't worry. The regular fire mode is the definition of I started blasting. After blasting a ton of games solo and with a squad, I definitely have to say this is way more of a team weapon for me than it is solo. I think it feels a really fun elite hunter role in like a really big way when you lock in with it. But it's a little misleading as this anti-tank keyword is on it, and it doesn't really anti-tank that good. I found that a little weird because when we look at the wiki description from Killzone, it says that it's very effective against enemy vehicles or heavily armored enemies. But if you light it off on something like a factory strider, you need to be like the perfect distance away. If you're too far, most of the shots are just going to hit like randomly. If you're too close, they're just going to completely miss, and you want most of them to be hitting it in the head or obviously the eye. But most of the time when you do shoot at a factory strider, you're just softening up this massive health pool, and the spear has the same kind of problems against the factory strider. So what I did try was getting in behind the factory strider, seeing if I could get right in that batusi. And that didn't work either. But then we had the technological breakthrough of the century, ladies and gentlemen. There's technology. There's for sure technology with this thing. 20-meter backshots have finally been unlocked. Now, does this work all the time? Unfortunately, no. Nobody has that much juice in them. But 50% of the time, 100% of the time, are odds I'm willing to bet on. And it made me wonder, what makes the rocket spin a certain way? And I found a lot of weird technology with this gun, all based on specific distances to spin the rockets a certain amount into the part of enemy that you wanted to hit with it. For instance, a Hulk at 20 meters 3 out of 4 times had rockets spin into its heat sink, killing it in 2 shots. But I had to be equal elevation, and if I was below it, it wouldn't happen. And if I was above it, it also wouldn't happen sometimes. So while we have some cool technology here, for now I decided to round it out to be consistent at any range instead with a well-balanced build that handles pretty much everything the game can throw at you. Eagle Strafe is going to be our bread and butter for rounding that out and softening all the targets up and stripping armor off of things so that the Wasp can get its big damage in. And sometimes the Strafe is just going to flat out kill whatever we're going to blast anyway, so it's just a win-win. We also take in the machine gun sentry to taunt things and give us space for bugs and squids because it gets so much value. Then we take in the rocket sentry on bots just because it cooks pretty much everything that they have. And finally, we have the AT emplacement for those moments where the game just decides to be chaotic and throw tons of armor everywhere. That way you can just shut it down and spray your Wasp at all the things it's good at killing. I also think that the gas grenade kind of clutches the Wasp super hard because it lets you space enemies really easily when you're getting zerged. But on the bots, I grab Thermite for when you just need to W key the big boys because honestly, they're the only real problem you'll run into. I also think you can take whatever primary you feel like, honestly, but the crossbow is always a safe bet if you're not sure. And then you can swap to whatever pistol you feel like, but I'll be Verdict gaming for the most part. But it's worth mentioning if you get unlucky Wasp shots on like a Hulk, for instance, if it hits it in the face enough times, you can just finish it off with the Senator, so that gets a ton of value too. This is also going to be a chart of all the enemies you could 1- and 2-shot with the other targets that I don't think are worth shooting unless you soften them up. With a Strafer, you've got a whole bunch of dudes wanting to blast with the Wasp at the same time. because honestly, you're going to eat so many supplies up if you just shoot at everything. I also don't recommend shooting the Wasp at spawners, like shooting it at bug holes. Most of the time it just hits the sides. Shooting it at fabricators, it takes too many unless you get one to luckily spin into the hatch. And then the UFOs, like, just good luck, have fun trying to get it in the doorway. I also put some tips and tricks together with my community, and we covered quite a few of these already, but make sure that you're careful when shooting near friends. These missiles really like to prio Helldivers for some reason. And when you are blasting off, you want to make sure you re-aim after every shot that you at least think is going to kill something. That way you could just kill more things faster. Also, the reload cancel for this thing is pretty nice because you can see the cartridge bounce out of it. Then you can quickly just like snap it back up and then just put down any big guys that are trying to put you down. You also really can't use this in tight spaces, so we're looking for wide open maps and completely dodging jungle planets altogether. And make sure you aim up to not shelf yourself. Palstat himself said that you never want to be the shelf. But most importantly, over anything else, I think that the Wasp's positioning matters more than anything else you can do with it. It makes a night and day difference when you go to take the high ground, and it's just like you're using a completely different weapon. I mean, I was cooking everything like when I was above stuff. Hitting tank weak spots was just insanely easy. Everything was just evaporating off of the screen, and it removed almost all the inconsistencies from the rockets. It makes sure that none of them get hung up on any of the weird terrain, and it makes blasting elites like even easier. So make sure that you just stay mobile and always try and take the high ground. And when we start talking about like the best optimal situations, we can actually force that the majority of the time with spawn seeds or constellations. The Illuminate doesn't matter because their whole faction isn't out yet, so when you fight them, you're pretty much always going to get the same set of enemies. You just want to avoid shooting at Watchers because the rocket will just miss them most of the time, and it just isn't worth wasting that shot. The Harvesters usually take about 9 rockets if the shield is broken, unless you get a lucky leg joint shot, which, again, it was pretty inconsistent. So for the most part, you're only blasting these guys in a team or as a last resort to soften them up. What we're really looking for is the Stickmen and Flyboy removal, and it's only 1 rocket when it directly hits them. You just aim in and pop in and out as many times as you want. You can just completely wipe them off the screen. I know tons of weapons can take them out easily, but I don't think there's any as satisfying as it is with the Wasp. Then when you blast Stickman, the AoE also just blasts all the zombies away around them, and you end up getting like way more value out of your rockets. So when we move it over to the bugs, the spawn seeds we're looking for specifically are Bile Artillery and Nerf Spewer Seeds. This is probably like the best weapon in the game for nuking their patrols, and it's where you're going to see the most value and have the most fun. It was on average just taking me 2 rockets to kill an entire patrol of the Explodey Boys. So that ended up feeling really good. And I was constantly one-volleying Impalers when they deployed their tentacles, so that was not a big problem for me. Charger Behemoths were a little tricky sometimes. You can break both back armor pieces, and that's 14 back shots, which is a little too many for most people to be thrown out. But if you get behind them, it's super easy for 1 volley back shot to just send them flying. And if you're not really trying to be too conservative with ammo, you can just spray at them, and for the most part, 2 volleys will remove them. But when it came down to Bile Titans, we had some really awkward interactions, either instantly killing them because, again, the rockets loop into their chest at about like 40 or 50 meters, or they would take a ton of punishment because it would hit the legs or they were too close. Whatever it was, this was the most inconsistent enemy for the Wasp for me. So what I started doing was just taking an Eagle Strafe to strip the armor off the top of them, which also usually one-shots the Bile Titan for me if you hit it just right. So just make sure that you try and strafe it at least before you blast it with the Wasp. Otherwise, you're just going to have to pop in like 2.5 to 3 volleys. On the bots, we're looking for Strider and Devastator Seeds, with the Strider Seeds being interesting because you can 2-shot most of them, and that does end up eating a ton of ammo, and there are better weapons for that. But when you do get into the Devastator Seed with this thing, it feels amazing to use, and like they never even get a chance to become a problem. This was where I had some of the most fun with the Wasp, with the only thing being better being those Bile Artillery Seeds. And when you lock in, you can just delete every problem before it ever has a chance to be one. It was on average like 4 rockets to rip a patrol of them apart, and you could just re-snap through everything. It also just dominates gunships with 2 rockets per, and I've never had it fail off that. So I think that this is my favorite gunship patrol removal in the game because it just looks cool. And when we shoot at tanks, if we're above them, they get removed super fast, like almost instantly. And factory striders, again, they just feel terrible to shoot because we talked to them already, so you just want to be bringing something else for them altogether. So a lot of that stuff should help you out in a solo, but I really do think when you get in a team, things change drastically, and that's when you really feel the full potential of this weapon. I know a lot of people make fun of like RP squads and stuff a lot, but we do that all the time because I think it's really fun. When I play with my friends, like, we were blasting with, we had like the support driver with the rocket man and the machine gun specialist, and I actually feel like having somebody dedicated to like elite removal rounded the squad out really well and just made it really fun to go blasting with. Like, just having that like that same idea is like when we go play the cadet build or like all turrets or whatever, and when we just ran 4 wasps, pretty much everything was just getting annihilated too. It works a lot again like the turrets, where the more of you have of them, they just force multiply and let you delete everything on the screen. So that's my entire breakdown of the Wasp Launcher. I think it's one of the coolest and most fun support weapons to use in the entire game that plays that Elite Hunter role in a really fun way. And I think it really excels in a party over solo, and having a team of 4 of them is just ridiculous, right? And it feels thematic, but I do think it needs some buffs. Sitting there with like AP6 heavy penetration is awesome on paper, with it, but with the direct damage only being like 200, it ends up in a position where the keyword doesn't really matter that much. And I think that when you're in the first person mode, to solve this, like, you should just be able to guide the rockets like you would the commando. The airburst round also does feel a little bit awkward, so I think that the 7 shots should have like the AoE size of an airburst strike, just like so you would have a reason to use it. And the last thing I would like to see, which is a little more niche, is the ability to toggle the ammo type without kicking your team loader off. It just makes a really awkward interaction. And in general, I think this weapon is just a bunch of other weapons combined, and it just does their jobs kind of worse. But I really love using it. I think it's the most fun I've had blasting with a gun in ages. So while this isn't like the Omega S tier super weapon, you should be using whatever you think is the most fun and cool thing. That's what Helldivers is all about, like doing the most ridiculous thing you can think of. So if you have any cool tips and tricks that I missed for the Wasp, just let me know so we can continue to get better together.